Welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Behind the Wheel. This is our weekly ESPN Esports Rocket League program. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you're watching us on Twitch, on the ESPN app, on Twitter, or on YouTube. My name is Arda. I am your driver, your traffic cop behind the wheel, so to speak, here every single week. And we thank you very much for watching us, for interacting in chat. I have Twitch chat pulled up for all of your questions and comments. We definitely go through them throughout the show, and we thank you for all the suggestions that you've given us on the show, whether you thought of segment ideas, or whether you thought that we should tweak something here, or you didn't like something here, or you did like something there. We read every single comment you give us, whether you post it on Reddit, or you put it on Twitter at ESPN_esports, tagging us, of course. We appreciate it very much. Something you've all said is you want more Sleegi. You like his interviews, you like his cadence, you like his personality, you like his demeanor. He's got that Columbus, Georgia charm to him. Well, guess what? He's joining us for the entire show today. Sleegi, what's up, bud?
Not much, man. I'm just happy to be here. We got a lot of stuff going on this past weekend. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, there certainly is. We had another regional in the books. Of course, the grid is marching on. But we have some storylines that have developed that may or may not have come due to the fact that we have an overwhelming amount of Rocket League play, especially for teams. And that brings me to the first thing that I'd like to discuss here as we focus on Europe first. We'll get to the regional NA in a little bit, but let's talk about the Grid EU, Sleegi. Let's talk, before we get to even some results, let's talk about Chalked. It looks like they are, as their name suggests, chalked. They're done. They're gone. They forfeited their matches in the grid, and they went so far as to disband. There's a couple of tweets that cemented this fact from A-Lot, for example. So apparently the roster lock has already happened for the third regional. Me and my team thought it was tomorrow, so we didn't sign up yet. Very nice. Continues to go on and say also, since Magnus has gone to another team as well, we're not allowed to play the grid, so we're forfeiting the remaining weeks of the grid. Sorry for people who wanted to watch us lose. I mean play. But there was a lot of fans, I guess, whether they were memeing or not. Chalked always comes up in our chat, Sleegi, but I wonder, just like the idea of a team disbanding so early, but with already so many games having been played. How do you read this?
Well, I don't know if I would read it as inevitable. They've definitely been having their struggles. I mean, you look at their performances throughout the grid, and they just could not find a win week in, week out. They were getting loss after loss. You could see, I mean, them struggling. And I think a lot of people knew coming in that they weren't going to be this dominant team, that they weren't going to find too much success. But I really don't think I personally saw them disbanding this early. But at the same time, you know, with the results that they were getting and the sort of inability to get any sort of traction, it also really doesn't shock me in the end that they end up having this sort of result. I think it's a bit unfortunate. They definitely had their fans a lot, been a really big personality in the scene for a while. But at the same time, I mean, you can't just continue to lose every single week like they have been and expect them to just stay around forever.
So Magnus, as was mentioned in that tweet, has already gone to a team called From the Air. He did that on September 15th. Chalked is gone as a team. They have disbanded. This does open up the conversation, Sleegi, at least a thought to, you wouldn't, I mean, it's not uncommon to see hasty or rash decisions, or maybe that's not the correct terminology here, but just we see fast decisions being made in esports all the time, also Rocket League. And I wonder if this is appropriate given how many games are already played. And we talk about the grid not necessarily being the biggest factor when it goes into power rankings, and Sleegi will have both of his power rankings later on in the show. But with the amount of games played at competitive levels, the grid, regionals, the field even, etc., I wonder if that builds up on a week-to-week basis and it sort of exacerbates problems within a team such that we may see more of these kind of stories, especially among struggling teams. What do you think?
No, I think you're hitting the nail right on the head, especially, we have had a lot of games played. There's been a lot of Rocket League, but the thing to remember is we're still super early on here. We're only just finishing out Regional 2 of the first split. There's still one more regional in this split. There's still two more splits after that. And it was one thing that I had been talking about for a while and really thinking about is, if teams fail to perform early on here, whether it be in the grid or the regionals, I fully expect there to be massive sweeping changes because you can kind of afford it this early on. Yeah, you're going to lose that little bit of an edge that teams who stay together throughout the whole thing have. But really, if you're going to make sweeping changes to your teams, to your play style, to anything like that, now is the time to do it when you still have a lot of time to sort of build things back up and get back into the position. What you're going to see is as things go on and as the season progresses is when you're really going to start seeing things solidify. But for right now, we're already seeing it with E United making some moves with their sub list. This upcoming transfer window, I'm sure with how short it is going to be just absolutely hectic. But this is the time for teams to make changes while they can still get back into things.
Is this enough of a sample size in your opinion? I know that there's a lot more games this season than there have been previously. Is it enough for teams to say, yes, we've seen enough, the amount of games that we have played here, if we're unsuccessful, a change is necessary?
Yes and no. I think it really comes down to which team, right? Because we have had a lot of games. We've had two regionals. We've had 2 months of the grid. I think after that amount of games, especially if the teams are watching them in scrims, which they absolutely should be, and if they have a read on what the locker room feels like, there's definitely been enough games where teams can sort of make those decisions. Now, if a team has been sort of having its ups and downs and been kind of all over the place, maybe it's a little too early to start making rash decisions. But with a team like Chalk that wasn't really able to gain any traction, and with a team like E United who was very underperforming from where people thought they should be, I definitely think that they're well within their right to make these changes. And I wouldn't be surprised seeing other teams that are potentially having these consistent struggles start to make roster moves and other sorts of changes as well.
Well, speaking of teams that probably in this case won't make roster changes, especially with their recent success, but did stumble this past weekend, Team BDS, one of the toasts of the town in EU. Last week was a banger for Team BDS. They won the grid. They won the EU Regional 2. This time around, they didn't do so well in the grid week 7. And of course, this is just one example. They did make the quarterfinals pretty much exclusively from middle of August until September. And then since then, they've had some success. And now, probably their worst result in a while, at least since the beginning of August, getting basically out of playoffs for the grid. What do you think this means for this team? And is there any cause for concern here?
I really don't think there is. You're going to have teams have bad weeks. You're going to have teams have bad days. I think BDS has proven consistently that they are one of, if not the top team in EU. I mean, we've seen them take both regionals. They've really had a strong presence throughout the grid. It's not the result they wanted, obviously, and they're going to want to look at it and make sure that whatever went wrong in that grid, they're able to shore back up on. But you're going to have bad results, and I don't want to just start sounding the alarm for a team that, other than this one mishap, has just been an absolute dominant presence. I mean, you see the same thing in the likes of NA with someone like Space Station. They dominate throughout most anything they're in, but you'll see a couple games here or there, a couple losses where you just kind of look at it and you're like, what went wrong? But it doesn't really tarnish the accomplishments they've had so far. So for a team like BDS, I think it's just a bump in the road. I don't think it's anything to sort of start wondering if they're going to start falling apart as a team.
So they got swept by Vitality. They actually lost both their games. They only won one game against Singularity. They lost 3-1 in Group A, and then they went, or groups A and B, pardon me. They went down to the losers bracket. They got swept by Vitality. Vitality ended up, of course, winning the entire tournament. So why don't we transition to that? This is a team, Sleegi, that always gets talked about, right? Like, this is a team that people were expecting so much more from the entire season. And now here they are, getting back to their winning ways, or as people would expect. They sweep Monkeys, an impressive result for Monkeys in this in the grid. But Vitality looked very strong, particularly in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, Vitality looked absolutely phenomenal all the way throughout. It really did feel like they were the team to beat on that day, and no one could do it. They just were able to go all the way through. They were making it happen. K-Dop was a superstar on the day, but I got to give a huge shout out to Monkeys. As you mentioned, that was a phenomenal performance from them. I mean, yeah, you don't quite take the grid, but I mean, you're losing to Renault Vitality on a day where they really looked unstoppable. And for a team like the Monkeys to have a performance like that, that is a huge win for them, their morale, and how they're going to continue to approach and how other teams view them. It's big that they were able to make it all the way to the finals, even though the finals themselves didn't quite go the way they might have liked.
So Vitality win the latest edition of the grid. They beat Guild Esports in the quarterfinals, Triple Trouble convincingly in the semifinals, and then it really never looked in jeopardy against Monkeys, even though Monkeys beat Oxygen and Top Blokes on the way to the finals. Vitality looked like they were in control the entire series. But still, like you said, it's always nice to see these feel-good underdog stories, right? Teams that we don't normally talk about every single week, especially on this program. This is really the first time we're talking about Monkeys this season, and they earned their right to be spoken about and to get a shout-out because they did so well in this grid.
Yeah, no, absolutely earned every second, every bit of praise. I mean, you know, watching them, especially I went back and was watching some of their games leading up to that Vitality match, and they really did feel like they were operating on a completely another level. And it's something that I found really interesting as a major difference between EU and NA is NA, it really feels like it's all about pressure on the ball, getting shots on target, just getting in the opponent's face and making something happen. Where when I watch EU games, it feels like I'm watching a game of chess. It feels like these teams are all pretty much on the same playing field as far as mechanics. Obviously, some a little bit better than others, but it really feels like the mind games, the team tactics and strategies are what are the king of EU Rocket League right now. And seeing teams like the Monkeys start to figure that out and get in a way where they can go against these teams and start playing on a mentally higher level is some of the best Rocket League I think we've ever seen. Like this season, if you look at NA and you want to watch mechanics, it's there. But if you want to watch players playing the game smartly and getting things done, EU has pretty much got you covered.
So taking a look at the fall regional points standings in the top 16, Team BDS still very much in the lead. Vitality jumping up, Giants Gaming jumping up. It looks like a lot of the teams are sort of leveling out, at least in Europe. The second place team right now with 450 points is Top Blokes. And they actually have some news as it pertains to their immediate future. They tweeted on Sunday that they will be making a substitution. So Archie, who had a lot of fanfare coming into this season, really popped off in many moments of many games for Top Blokes, will be out. And Emre will be coming in. And the tweet even says, "Time to show what you can do." Does this come as a surprise to you at all?
It does a little bit. Archie, I feel like, has been a very prominent and solid member of this Top Blokes team. And the way they worded the tweet, it makes me seem like, you know, this maybe isn't something permanent. There might be something going on behind the scenes and he'll be back, because it does say like this Tuesday for the grid. It doesn't read to me as some sort of long-term solution, but you know, it'll be interesting to see what Emre is able to accomplish. He's definitely got some big shoes to fill. As Archie, like I said, he's been playing it fantastically for Top Blokes, one of the top teams in EU. So it really just makes me wonder what could potentially be going on behind the scenes to even cause this substitution in the first place.
He's had some connectivity issues, or at least something in the past, right, that has precluded him from playing previously as well for Top Blokes. So it could be something like that. We didn't get any details, right? Like, we don't know if it's a rift in the team. We don't know if he doesn't want to play. We don't know if he's being substituted. We don't know any of this. It could really be he has a prior commitment, can't play. It could be anything.
I mean,
Like
yeah,
it could be something as benign as that. It may not be something dramatic per se.
No, I'm right there with you. I really, I would go out on a limb and say there's no way that this is a permanent roster change. There has to just be something, for this Tuesday that they're just not really having Archie around to play, because if they were to make this change permanent, I would really be asking some questions, because performance is not an issue.
Yeah,
I think you're right. There just has to have been something, right, that has prevented him from playing this week, because nothing else really makes sense.
one of our regular community members, Prawn, says Emrys cracked. Archie's supportive, so definitely just something he has going on. Maybe he's got an appointment or something he can't get out of. That happens. So there you go. Why don't we move over to North America? G2 Esports, air conditioning was on full blast. They were all very comfortable and happy at the proper temperature in their team house as they won the grid. They swept NRG, which sounds even more impressive now, Sleegi, now that we know the results of the regionals. But G2 were absolutely on fire. They toughed it out against E United in the quarterfinals, won by 2 in the 7th game. Then they demolished Team Envy and NRG to claim the grid crown for this week. Very impressive.
Man, I tell you what, North America, the top 5 to 6 in North America is so interchangeable. It feels like it's incredible. G2 on that grid it's so interesting to watch, because you mentioned that E United game, and that was one that I was casting for them in the grid. And they take it so close to that game 7, and it really felt like E United had an opportunity to take it, but maybe some miscommunication. It felt like E United thought it was a best of 5 instead of 7. That may have messed with their mentality. But then you see G2 go from a really close game against an E United team that, a lot of people would say that G2 should take easily, and then they go against teams like Envy and NRG, and they just get stuff done. And it's really interesting to me, the dichotomy of how this G2 team can look going game after game, because sometimes they look like it's just an unstoppable force, and then other times they look like a team that other teams can beat. And that inconsistency is really interesting, because when they're on, they are absolutely on.
Yeah, I think we're going to say the exact same thing about NRG when we talk about the regional. Space Station Gaming, though, why don't we talk about them a little bit? Because in the regional, definitely, we saw them fall to the Peeps in the quarterfinals. They didn't have the best week. They didn't perform as we thought they might. They didn't even make the playoffs. They did compete, right, in the grid this week? I'm just looking. Yeah.
Yes.
They didn't, they lost to Kansas City Pioneers, and then they lost to the Peeps, so they didn't even make the playoffs. So this is one of those weeks, and we're going to get to your rankings. Let's not spoil it here, but when you look at Space Station Gaming's week as a whole, of course they're going to be under a bigger microscope than any other team, because many people put them at number 1, if not most people, in the NA rankings, based on their past performance. So a week like this, especially the result at the regional, which we'll get to, how concerning is that to you?
It's not, I wouldn't call it concerning, but it's definitely cause for note. Kansas City has been a team historically so far this season that has given Space Station a run for their money. And, Kansas City just a really solid team in their own right. And they're trying to make a bid to be considered one of the top 5 teams in North America, because they consistently are getting these performances against top-ranked teams. And it's really impressive how they're able to continually compete and keep things close. They get their wins, and when they don't, they're getting the games on a razor-thin margin. But for a team like Space Station, they have been so consistently dominant. You can't expect a team to win every single game, to win every single event. You're going to have days where they feel off. And I felt like this with NRG when they were having their woes near the start of the season, and I feel like this with Space Station now. They've had a bad week. Things haven't quite gone the way that they would have liked, but I don't think it's starting to ring the alarm bells yet. Obviously, every time that you have bad results, you want to look at it. You want to figure out, what did we do wrong? What do we need to do and improve? But I'm not going to sit here and start saying, oh, man, it looks like SSG may be falling off here a little bit from just one bad week. I need to see them consistently having negative performances week after week before I really start to feel like they're starting to get into a slump, or there may be problems with the team as a whole.
One last thing on the grid. Want to give a shout out to Kansas City Pioneers. They pushed NRG to the absolute limit. I know we're going to talk about XSET in a little bit, but we got to give credit to KCP, like you mentioned here. It went to overtime. And NRG also had the default win as the grid every week in terms of their format would allow going into the playoffs, and they still pushed the series to 7 games. In fact, they won the first 3 games. So it was I guess in a way it was a reverse sweep because NRG did win 3 in a row, but that last game went to overtime. And so Kansas City Pioneers, they tested limits against NRG this week.
Yeah, no, they really did. And it's like I was saying, they are trying to make that bid to be a top 5 team. I think a lot of people maybe sleeping on them because they're not as much of a known name in Rocket League, but that is it's so swiftly changing. I mean, when you consistently get results like they have with a team that they've got, it drags attention. And I think the number one thing they need to focus on is now that the attention is starting to get focused on them, they need to take it and run with it and continue to get these results because people look at results. It doesn't matter what org you're under, from Kansas City to NRG to someone like the Peeps. What matters is how do you perform in these situations against top teams. And Kansas City has shown that they can absolutely compete with the top of them.
Well, speaking of top teams, NRG is now the top team as it pertains to rankings, not our power rankings. At least not yet. We're going to still keep that a secret until we get to them a little bit later on. Sleegi will have his top 5 in NA and EU. But in terms of ranking points in North America, NRG now surpassed Space Station Gaming after this week. They are at 601 points, Space Station Gaming at 501, and Envy round out the top 3 with 450. And the result of that was an absolutely soul-crushing performance for every other team in North America. Oh my gosh, to quote Jay-Z, Sleegi, allow us to introduce ourselves once again. NRG showing you exactly why they are perennially called one of the best teams in the world and have had the success they had. There was never a point after they defeated XSET in the way they did. They never showed you any reason why they would not win the regional this past weekend. It was dominant.
No, I mean, dominant really feels like an underwhelming word with how NRG performed this past weekend. It was a hard-fought game against XSET, but like you said, from there on, it just felt like NRG was operating on a complete another level. 2 4-0 sweeps against the Peeps and Envy. And to win a regional, no less, it's not like, they're playing them in the grid, and the grid is absolutely important, but to get that sort of result in a regional, to take it all when you got all these world points on the line, NRG really did show more of what we saw from them during this offseason. Because during the offseason, they absolutely looked like a team that was impossible to beat. They had some struggles at the beginning of the RLCS season. But my goodness, after last night, it feels like they're back on form.
And Garrett G even said it after they won the regional in the championship interview. He said, you got to give a lot of credit to XSET. They were on their game. They played us very well. They pushed us to the limit. And at points in the series, he went, I'm paraphrasing here, he went so far as to intimate that XSET could have won that series. And they really looked like they were very competitive. Of course, the last game was a 3-0 win for NRG, so they cruised in that last game. But even to get to that point, he gave a lot of credit to XSET. And he also talked about, like you said, the parity that we're seeing in North America right now. But when you see a performance like that, Sleegi, that NRG was able to pull off, especially against the other 2 teams that people perennially put in the top 3, or at least in the top 5, the Peeps and Team Envy in particular, I mean, that's scary. That's very scary.
It's terrifying for teams to look at a team like NRG and just see them just wiping the floor with top 5 teams. I mean, you can't help but look at that and just be utterly impressed. And it really goes to show how well this combination of Squishy and Justin specifically are working. They've been combining on plays. Squishy playing much more of a support role than I think anyone anticipated him doing so coming into this team. But it has really worked wonders. And this is an NRG team, and this is a North American region that really feels like when a team is on their game, they are absolutely unstoppable. NRG definitely on their game. And what I want to see and what I hope for is as we get closer to these international majors and as we draw closer to Worlds, that we have days where both sides are absolutely at their peak of performance. Because when we do, we're going to see Rocket League on a level that I don't think we've witnessed up to this point.
Speaking of witnessing Rocket League, unlike anything we've seen, Justin really cementing himself as the best player in the world when he is on his game. His stats during the RLCS Regional 2 in North America were lights out. He had an average of 1.23 goals a game. He had an average of 1.92 saves. His shot percentage was at 28%. His rating was a 1.46. I mean, this is just ridiculous. And like even plays, right? That triple fake that he had throughout the tournament. Like some of the things he was doing was just like astounding.
Yeah, I mean, no, Justin has always been in the conversation of one of the best players in the world. He's always been one of those figures that when people talk about mechanical level play in Rocket League, when they talk about how smart decision makings, it's Justin, it's Squishy, it's Torment, or not Torment, it's Turbo Pulsa, and it's Typical. It's those four players always seem to come into discussion of just, absolute units when it comes out on the field. And Justin, like you said, playing out of his mind this past weekend and seeing some of the plays that he's able to pull off. I've watched a lot of Rocket League, just hundreds and hundreds of hours of top level play. And I am still amazed at Justin's ability to read a situation in a frame, make a pixel perfect decision on where he needs to place the ball, where he needs to get there, and then execute on it flawlessly. And to do that on such a consistent basis as he does is truly something else. And he's deserving of being in that conversation of one of the best players in the world.
So you mentioned Turbo Pulsa, and normally he is a fantastic player. In this series against NRG, though, in the final, he was pretty non-existent. He didn't make an impact at all. It seemed like he just couldn't get out of first gear. What was it about this series that he just didn't show up?
I really don't know. Not Tom. I keep saying Torment. Turbo, one of those players that he's so smart. He's so smart when it comes to the game. And I just feel like he outthinks himself in certain situations, especially in a region like North America, where the focus really is more on the mechanical level play. Turbo will sometimes try and outthink the opposition, and then they'll just go for it. They'll just try and gun it down the field. And I think it catches him off guard. He needs to be in a frame of mind where he's playing looser and just more essentially in line with the rest of his team. And if it's not happening, things can really fall apart, because I don't quite think he has the mechanical skill to keep up with the likes of Justin and Squishy. He's definitely got it to be there, but his mental ability to read the play and react and rotate accordingly has to be absolutely razor sharp, especially when a team like NRG is playing at the level that we saw them playing this last weekend.
So I don't know if the chat is talking about NRG's record in games. I don't know if this is a official record, Sleegi, but in Group B, they went 9-0 in Stage 1. In Stage 2, they went 9-1. They dropped one game to Jamal Jabari. And then in the playoffs, they only dropped 2 games to Exet. So they only lost 3 games the entire tournament, and I believe their overall record was 29-3.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter who you're playing against, right? Like if a team makes it into the regionals, I mean, Jamal Jabari as well, a team that's been around for a while and is a really good team, for them to take a game off of NRG is huge for them. But to go up against all of these teams in RLCS and only drop 3 games across the whole regional, come on, that's absolutely insane. The performance that we saw coming from them, it's ridiculous.
Well, we'll find out what NRG's performance did to sway their placement in the power rankings a little bit later on. Very soon, Sleegi will give you his top 5 in NA and EU. One thing that you've been mentioning, again, we want to make this show as focused towards the community as possible. You give us suggestions and comments, Reddit and Twitter at ESPN_esports. We listen and we want to incorporate as much as possible because we want you to look forward to the show every single week. And if you only have an hour, we know there's a lot of Rocket League. If you only have an hour to catch up on everything, we want this to be the hour for you. One thing you mentioned is we'd like to see more plays. We'd like to see more lists. And we will endeavor to bring that to you as much as possible. Our top 10 plays are coming up in a little bit, but we decided to put together a special top 5 before we get to the power rankings. Here are the top 5, according to ESPN Esports. Our great producer behind the scenes, Thomas Tishio, Tish, put this together for you. This is our top 5 own goals and misses of Season X. Have a look.
Mist will get the first, and now that they can put it on net, oh, he almost got back to it. Tried to boost down as far as he could, and Atomic can't find the net either. Turbo finally, no, it's Atomic. 2 goals.
It's an own goal. Atomic's shot is wide, and because Turbo, I think, cut off Chicago's turn.
Here we go, Magic Bear. Oh, no, that's gonna be a goal. No. Magic Bear will claim it, and I don't think there is going to be any attempt to claim it from anybody on the Sonics. And just be as naturally good as they actually are.
Oh, because we've seen it, haven't we? I mean, last week, when Guild...
Oh, that's a great shot from... Oh! Oh, my goodness, that's one of the best own goals I've ever seen.
Look at this, I mean...
Thunderous! Magnificent!
Oh!
Truly glorious!
Finesse! David
What
Beckham
a goal!
would be proud of that finesse.
On the final seconds. And now, we'll see these adjustments. Meanwhile, wait a second, they're all goaling, James Bond. Oh no, we'll make it though.
Justin, downtown shot. Mektos. Whoopsie.
Rain in. Mist has got to keep this in the air, though. There's a pass one respawn. One in goal. He gets the block, but it's going to drop. Dangerous Turbo. Kid bumped it up, but it bounces off the crossbar and back down. That's tragic.
Oh, tragic is right.
Hope you enjoyed that. Feel free to keep giving us some ideas, like I said, on Reddit and on Twitter. Let's get from one top 5. Let's move over to another one. Time has come now for Sleegi to present to you here on ESPN Esports Behind the Wheel his top 5 power rankings for NA and for Europe. We're going to begin with North America. And I can already tell you right now, you don't have to put anything in chat. Don't have to write a single thing. All of you, guaranteed 100%, take it to the bank. You will all agree with this list.
Oh, man, you're setting me up for failure here. I'll tell you what. I anticipate some people to, disagree, but I've come with points to support my claims. At the very least, I didn't just throw all 5 teams in a hat, jumble them up, take one out at a time, and be like, yeah, that's number 5.
I can't wait for you to go through this list and hear exactly how you ordered them. And I'm sure that you have a lot of facts and also great opinions to back it up. So let's get right to it. Top 5 in NA. Who's number 5?
Number 5 for me is going to have to be G2 Esports. And I know already right out of the gate, there's going to be a couple people that do not agree with that, but let me explain. G2, before this point, was sitting at my number 6, hovering on a number 7. G2 has been a team that has consistently looked really good, but hasn't consistently looked really great. They looked fantastic in the grid. They looked absolutely wonderful. But I need to see more out of them. I need to see this G2 Esports team consistently show me that this grid and recent performances aren't a fluke. I need to see them really give it to another level against these teams. I think they have a potential. I definitely think they have the ability to reach in the top 2, the top 1 potentially even, but I need to see more out of them, and I just haven't seen enough yet to feel comfortable ranking them higher. We've had good results, But like I said, I just need to see more.
So they've been top 4, at least a semifinalist in the last 4 weeks of the grid. They have won the last 2 weeks of the grid. However, to your point, they have only made the quarterfinals of both regional events, which ostensibly matter more than the grid. So my question to you here is, how much of the most recent regional results, despite G2 winning the grid, contributed to this number 5 placement?
It does a lot. I try and take everything that they've done throughout the season. I really, really, really try and avoid very recent hot results when thinking about how I'm ranking teams top 5, because I'm not ranking them top 5 for the last week. I'm trying to rank them top 5 in North America throughout this season so far. And I really think that if you look at G2 as a team that has been competing in these events throughout Season X so far, number 5 is really fitting for them. They're on the cusp of 4, moving into 3, into 2 if they can keep this up. But taking the broad stroke look at all of the results, the grids, the regionals, how they've been performing elsewhere, I really feel like 5 for this point in time for them is a turning point, because they could move up, they could stay stagnant, or they could move down. And I stand by my decision to put them there just based off what I've seen from them as a whole.
Gotta love the conviction. Gotta love the conviction. You come armed with reasons, and that's all we can ask for when putting together these power rankings. I'm sure a lot of people will be asking for reasons when you talk about number 4.
Well, number 4 also probably going to turn some heads, but it's another one that I'm really behind. Number 4 in my mind in North America is the Peeps. And this is an interesting decision. It was one I fought back and forth with myself on whether to put G2 at 5 or the Peeps at 5, but I decided G2 at 5 and the Peeps at 4 for one reason, and it's I have seen the Peeps consistently perform well. They have had their woes for sure. They have a really not a fantastic performance at all against NRG this last weekend. But I think looking at this team as this unit as a whole throughout the season so far, I feel like they've consistently brought the results to rank them ahead of G2. I think that as a team, they have performed well against these top North American teams. They've had really good showings when they've been on screen, and I've seen them be more consistently in that number 4 slot than I have with G2. Now, is G2 a team that could overtake them easily with a couple more good results? Absolutely. I would say that all of the teams essentially in the top 5 right now for North America are razor thin in margins with each other, but for me, the Peeps just had that little bit more of consistency, especially when playing these top teams, for me to give them that number 4 slot.
So this is an interesting point. I think that chat is relatively agreeing in the sense that they understand the points you're making, and they're also saying, okay, we can see his point of view. They're also saying they would have swapped 4 and 5. However, when we look at the results, like you said, consistent quarterfinalists for the Peeps, except in the regionals when, like I said, it matters more. They've reached the semifinals there. So when it matters more, it seems like they have performed better. How much of a margin is there between 4 and 5 right now on your list?
It's almost indistinguishable. Honestly, at any moment, you could flip these teams around. If you, Arda, came to me and was like, you know what, I think G2's 4 and the Peeps are 5, I'd be like, yeah, that's a pretty good take, because it really is that close between these teams. I mean, we've been seeing them both get really good results. It was something that when I was making this list, I was really struggling with myself. But I think at the end of the day, the Peeps have just shown themselves to be more consistent, especially in the head-to-head matchups with G2 than G2 have, and that put them over the edge. But it's such a fine balance between these teams that we're seeing that it really could change at any moment. And once we start seeing more games and as the season goes along, I think we'll potentially start to see these teams cement themselves more in the slots.
G2 at number 5, Peeps at number 4. Who is in the middle of your power rankings?
My number 3, this one probably going to be less surprising to people, is going to be Team Envy. And this is a team that, again, we've seen perform really, really well. We've seen consistently show up to grids. They make it to the semifinals more times than not. And this past weekend, they make it all the way to the finals. Yeah, they get swept by NRG, but it's an NRG team that I think you place them against any team in the world yesterday, and they absolutely just, perform out of their mind. But this is an Envy team that really, to me, have shown that they, even when they're not on their best days, and we saw Envy not on their best day yesterday, they're still making it to the final. They're still making it really, really far. They've had some ups and downs, but overall, even on the downs, they're still sitting higher than a lot of other teams when they're on their highs. And so that cements Envy as a number 3 team for me. It's a similar situation to G2, where a couple more results either way could see them slip up or down. But at the moment, I think they've really cemented themselves right in the dead center of the pack as we continue to see how these games play out.
Yeah, they've been consistently in the running. They've been consistently in everyone's power rankings all season long, definitely as we've been doing them here on Behind the Wheel at ESPN Esports. And like you said, they beat G2, who won the grid this week, looked very impressive. They beat Kansas City Pioneers, who literally ran roughshod throughout their stage play and were competitive against Envy in that semifinal. And they just ran into an NRG team that nobody was going to beat them on Sunday, really. Let's be honest. No team around the world. The way Justin was playing, the way the team was playing, you could put any team from around the entire world in front of NRG, and nobody was going to beat them on that day.
No, I'm right there with you. And that's really why I think, even though you see on paper, right, a 4-0 sweep for Envy looks awful, but when you look at the team they're playing against and you watch how NRG was performing, you start to be like, okay, yeah, that makes a little bit more sense. I can see that now.
So G2's at number 5, the Peeps number 4, Envy number 3. Who is your runner-up on your list?
Now, everyone knows the 2 teams that are remaining. You're not going to see a Kansas City Pioneer pop in randomly here. You're not going to see Alpine Esports or E United. Hey, Alpine looks fantastic. But you're not going to see those teams sneak in. Everyone knows the last 2 remaining teams are NRG and Space Station Gaming. And what it comes down to is who is at the number 2. And I'm going to draw this out a little bit, because as soon as I say 1, the number 1 slot is already going to be essentially perfect. But it is NRG for number 2, because I have seen Space Station be incredibly consistent throughout the season. Space Station has been one of the teams that have always looked like a massive brick wall. And you know who hasn't? NRG. I mentioned it earlier on in the show, and I'll mention it again now. NRG had a really rough start to the season. NRG, they fall out of the first grid super quickly. They have some questionable results in the regionals, and they've started to really pick it back up, and they picked it back up in a big way. But you can't look at NRG playing out of their minds recently, and Space Station Gaming having less than favorable results, and be like, okay, yeah, NRG is the number 1 team in the world right now, or in North America at least. Because in my mind, Space Station Gaming, they worked hard to get to that number 1 slot. And I'll be remiss if I let one weekend of Space Station not playing absolutely on form have them drop from that top position. I need to see teams like NRG, like Envy, like the Peeps and G2 consistently find results against this Space Station team, and not just one-offs here or there before I start to even think about dropping Space Station from that top spot.
So I can see the argument that somebody might make, because this was really the big debate. Where does NRG rank after this blockbuster week? Space Station fell off this week. They made the quarterfinals of the regionals. They didn't make playoffs in the grid. They had a bad week. But before that, they've been tremendous and have been la creme de la creme in NA. Nobody is disputing that. NRG, meanwhile, just demolished the second regional. And don't forget that Space Station beat NRG in the first regional. So the way that you looked at it was, I'm looking at it from an entire season's point of view. Some people that might put NRG at number 1 in their own power ranking might be looking at it from a, what about at this moment today? So from that point of view, I can see NRG showing what they did on Sunday. If you assume that trend continues, you could put them at number 1 in the power rankings if the Sunday NRG continues.
No, I absolutely. If you talk about within the past week and a half, absolutely, NRG 100% the number one team in North America. But like you mentioned and like I mentioned, I'm trying to look at this from a season perspective. And, one really big thing to point out, and I've seen a couple of people point it out in chat, and it was a point that I was going to bring up as well, is NRG has not beaten Space Station when they have had Retals out on the field. And so I really haven't seen how this NRG squad has faced up against consistently speaking, a Space Station team at full strength. We need more games. And that's one of the things I really love about this new format in RLCS X is we get a lot of games. We see these teams playing each other all the time. It's incredible. It used to be that, you would see Space Station Gaming and NRG once, and whoever won that was obviously the better team. But now we're seeing them match up against each other at such a rate where it really feels like you can get more of a feel for how these teams operate as a whole and not just on any given day. And until I see NRG consistently performing better than Space Station and not just one or two off weeks for SSG, they will continue to be at that number 2 spot. But again, it was like I was mentioning with G2 and the Peeps. It's the same situation with NRG and SSG. They're razor thin margins. It would be so easy for NRG to pull ahead and for SSG to fall behind. This North American top 5 is one of the most competitive set of teams that we have seen in a long, long while. Gone are the days of RLCS where you would have super teams that just absolutely just crash their way through everything, dominating their way. Now it really feels like the British Premier League in a sense where all of the teams could beat all of the other teams at the top half of field any given match day. It's incredible.
So number 5, G2, number 4, the Peeps, number 3, Team Envy, number 2, NRG, and number 1, by perhaps a thin margin, at least we will have to wait and see what happens in the very near future in NA, Space Station Gaming, but definitely deserving when you look at the season like Sleegi did, rightfully so, of earning and continuing to occupy that top spot. Now we move on to Europe, and I wonder because as we get out of the top 3, top 4 in Europe, that middle block, if this were a top 10, it would be a very interesting 6 through 10, but we're only going to look at top 5 here. So who did you select? Which European Rocket League team did you put at your number 5 spot in Europe?
So this is a list that, while not easy to make, was definitely easier than North America. My top 5, or my number 5 for the top 5, starts with Magnifico. They have had really good results, and you may have heard me saying it a lot, and it's because something I look at a lot when trying to make these top 5s is consistency. And Magnifico has been consistent in their ability to perform really well, whether it be in grids or in regionals. They have continued to have great performances against teams like Guild and others. And it really, in my mind, earns them that spot at number 5 and shows me that they've got a lot of potential to move up. But as with G2 in North America, they've also got the potential to fall down if they can't keep up the results.
So Magnifico, they did not compete in the grid this week, it looks like, unless I am mistaken.
Let me take a look.
I'm looking at the Grid EU Week 7, and it looks like Magnifico wasn't there?
I don't think they compete in the grid currently.
At all?
I believe that they're a team that has been more performing in regionals.
Okay, so they have impressed despite not being... We're not seeing them necessarily... at least at the grid level, regional level, the top 2 competitions, so to speak, regularly. So for them to even make the top 5 over other teams that regularly compete in the grid, and that's why I mentioned this, is very impressive, and it shows that you see something very special in them such that they would even crack the top 5.
Yeah, and it really has just come down to the results that we've seen from them. Like if I take a look at the regional events that we've been seeing coming out of them, they make it all the way to the semifinals in regional number 1. They take down Guild Esports 3-1. They only lose to Top Blokes in a game 6. Top Blokes being another team in EU that I think has consistently been a top performer. And then you take a look as well over at regional number 2. They don't quite make it into the final day, but I still think that this team if you're looking at things from a broad stroke perspective, have had more success on a consistent basis when you're looking at the games they're playing and who they're playing against and others. And I still feel like there could be a whole list of teams at this number 5 slot. The top 4 is really when you start to get into the meat of things. But I like what I've been seeing from Magnifico. I want to see them do it more. And I want to just see what they can continue to do with the bit of momentum that they've built so far.
Now, I don't want to, I'm not saying this to spoil the list. I think people can already make conclusions on who your top 4 are, but not on the list for your top 5, for example, are organizations like Team Liquid, like Dignitas, like Barcelona, major European Rocket League teams that haven't had the best results this season. Is that more a testament? How much of that is a testament to how poorly they've been performing, even if a couple of those teams may have had some favorable results recently? It hasn't been enough to crack a top 5.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to exactly what you're saying. Just not really great results. Dignitas especially sticks out to me as a team that a lot of people thought were going to be a really high performer coming into the season. And then they just, something has happened with that team. And they haven't really been getting the results that they really need to have been getting. And the same with a team like Team Liquid. They had a really rough start to the top of the season. And, they've started to improve a little bit more. But, you see these lineups, you see these big orgs behind them, and you expect a lot. And we just haven't really seen that out of them. And I think it's more a testament to this format and the opportunities that it gives to potentially teams that may not have had the opportunity before, teams like Magnifico, to edge their way higher and higher over these really big name org teams. And it's such an interesting set with EU, because I feel like the skill in EU on an overall basis is really interesting to look at, just because once you get out of the top 4 and you go 5 and lower, there's all kinds of competition going on down there. It's like the Wild West of which team is going to be able to come out with a result. Like, if you love underdogs, EU is where you want to be watching your Rocket League.
No kidding. Well, maybe many of these teams, or the remaining 4, are not necessarily underdogs in many games that they play. Let's get to them now. Magnifico 5, who's number 4?
My number 4 is going to be Giants Gaming, another team that, I feel like has earned their spot here in the number 4 position. They have looked really good. They make it all the way to the finals in this regional number 2, only falling to Team BDS. But it's been a team that, as I've been following them along, as I've been seeing them play, as I've been watching this team, they have felt to me like a number 4 team. They find those results. They don't quite go the distance, but they are consistently showing up. They're in these big games. They're in these big moments, and they're getting themselves in positions for success. They just need to cross that barrier, that threshold to bigger and brighter wins in moments where it really matters, to start edging their way up even farther up that list.
So at number 4, we have Giants Gaming, like you said. They've had some impressive results throughout the season, including a second-place finish at the 2nd regional. They made the quarterfinals of the Grid Week 7. They lost to Top Blokes there in a 4-3 series result. Do you think is Giants Gaming is an interesting one to me? Do you feel like, and this is going to sound odd in asking this, but do you feel like they will always remain a 4th, like that middle of the block? Like if you're looking at 4-7 or 4-6 in a top 10, will they remain in that spot in your opinion, or do they have the capacity to vault and actually compete for a top spot with time?
You see, that's a really interesting question, because I do feel like they have a really good foothold in that 6-4 range, that 7-4 range, but it really depends. I think they've definitely got the skill on the team to push farther. I mean, you can't be a bad team in EU right now and make it to the finals, obviously, but I don't know if they're the team that has the consistency to really push into that top 3, into that top 2. I need to see them essentially grab more wins in pressure moments. I need to see them win in games that well and truly matter. It's fantastic to make it to the finals, but you gotta show up in those moments, and it's something that until I see them begin to do that, I feel like they're really in good with this 7-4 area in EU, but I'm not quite sure if they have the ability to start really punching up into that top 3 zone just as of yet.
Who's at number 3?
My number 3, this one's going to be pretty easy, I think, to sort of guess. It's going to be Renault Vitality, another team that, a lot of people expected to do well, somewhat similar to Dignitas and Liquid, but has actually been performing to what I believe the expectations that people have been expecting of them. They make it into the semifinals, only dropping to Team BDS in Game 6. You see them make it to the semifinals in Regional 1 as well. And guess what? The exact same result, only dropping to BDS in Game 6. BDS has been a barrier for Renault Vitality to getting into that final stage of these regionals. And what's interesting about that is it shows that Renault Vitality is consistently getting to the point where they can beat everyone else leading up to that point to make it happen. And then you take a look at how they perform in the grid, especially with this recent week. They finally make it all the way through. They are able to clinch the championship of grid week number 7. But what's really interesting about that is they finally overcome that hurdle of Team BDS in the lower round. They get a 3-0 sweep. They're able to move on, and then they just make magic happen from there. And the reason that I don't have them higher is I need to see them do that more often. I need to see them beat teams like BDS and get to the final stages of these games, essentially, and make it happen more often. This is a fantastic grid from them. I just need to see them do it more consistently.
One more grid victory from Vitality. You think they crack the top 2?
I think they do. I think if you see Vitality take week 8 all the way through, especially if they play BDS again, I think they move up into that number 2 slot. I really, really do. The top 3 is starting to feel more like North America in my mind, where the teams are getting really close in the terms of skill. And if we can see Vitality just a little bit more, a couple more games, especially with the regional 3 on the horizon, if we can see them continue to perform like they have, it is not a big pond for them to jump to get into that number 2 or even really that number 1 slot.
All right, well, let's get to number 1 and number 2. Who do you have as the runner-up?
Well, the runner-up for me, I think the number 1 and 2 is pretty obvious for anyone who has watched a whole lot of EU Rocket League. Number 2 is going to be going to the Top Blokes, in my opinion. We were mentioning them earlier with my sort of confusion as to why Archie would be subbed. It cannot be permanent because this team has looked wonderful. They've looked absolutely fantastic. Their results speak for themselves. Their ability to get things done against top-level teams speak for themselves, and we have seen them on a consistent basis perform. Regional 1, they make it to the finals, only lose to BDS in Game 6. They're taking games off of them. Regional 2, we see them make it to the semifinals. Yeah, they get a not fantastic result against Giants Gaming, but I think overall they're still a better team. If you were to place Top Blokes against Giants 10 times, I think Top Bloke wins that 7 out of 10. It really just comes down to how they're performing on the day. And if you look at things from a season perspective, they have really, in my mind, cemented themselves as a number 2 team and have proven that they are a team to beat, especially within this region. And I'm really, really curious to see how they do against North American teams. I'm really curious to see how EU and North America match up in general, because I feel like they have such conflicting play styles. And it'll be interesting to see which one is able to edge out Top Blokes against someone like Envy. My goodness, I just want to see that happen.
I just love, I know we've talked about this almost every week, but just the fact that we can't have those kind of world championship events and, the fall split, even in RLCS, has changed due to COVID, etc. It just builds and builds and builds. What we can't have, we want so much. And then when eventually we are able to get those world championships or intercontinental matchups between NA and EU in particular, it's going to pop off. So it's going to be amazing. It's going to be absolutely incredible.
I mean, once we start getting lands again, that's going to be a fantastic. But what, really has me salivating is Worlds, man. Worlds when we get to Worlds, after all, like, people are talking about it a little bit like, oh, there's so many games, or oh, there's so much Rocket League. But think about this. When we make it to Worlds, there have been almost an entire year of Rocket League. 3 regionals in each split, 3 splits. So that's 9 regionals, the 3 majors that come with those, all of the games of the grids, all of it leading up to Worlds, where you see these teams with the hundreds at that point of games that they will have played to make it to that point. It's going to be a spectacle. I honestly believe that Worlds, this upcoming for Season X, is going to be it's going to be the biggest event in the history of Rocket League esports by far.
Cannot wait for that. It's going to be absolutely amazing. And what is also amazing, Sleegi, is your #1 in EU. Super shocking here. Monkeys. Wow. Why? How?
I'm just going to go ahead and turn chat off now, just in case they believe you. My goodness,
wait for
I
a
can't
second.
imagine.
Let's just let chat run through and be like, monkeys, let's go.
Yeah, monkeys. They were able to make it to the very end of the grid, which, I mean, again, solid performance. But no, everybody in the chat would have just burned me at the stake if I didn't choose them. Team BDS, in my mind, still the #1 team in EU, without a doubt. They have a not fantastic performance in the past grid, but I think if you look at this team as a whole, if you look at their results, if you look at their games, they've earned the ability to lose a couple games. Okay, they've earned the right to have a lackluster grid and not have everyone just jump on the, oh man, is BDS going to be okay bandwagon? No, but BDS is going to be just fine. BDS, I think you put BDS against NRG and Space Station, and you've got a really good game, because I really do not know who would win. BDS plays on such another level. I made the analogy earlier of EU Rocket League feels like watching chess. Team BDS Rocket League feels like watching a grandmaster play chess. It's on another level. Their ability to break down plays, work together, be in the perfect spot. They don't have to do anything flashy because their positioning just makes it seem so buttery smooth and easy for them. It's unbelievable how smart they play this game.
So there's your top 5 in Europe, according to Sleegi. Team BDS at #1, Top Blokes #2, 3 Renault Vitality, 4 Giants Gaming, and 5 Magnifico. Don't forget, we do this every single week. Whoever my esteemed guest is on Behind the Wheel, they bring us their top 5 in terms of power rankings in NA and EU. That was asked by you, the community, to do that every single week, and we will endeavor to do that here on ESPN Esports Behind the Wheel. Something else we do to round out the show is give you our top 10 plays of the week. We're going to do that in a moment, but while that is happening, feel free to flood questions in chat for Sleegi, because we'll spend the last few minutes of the show asking him any question that you have regarding Rocket League. Throw it in the chat as you watch the top 10 plays. Without further ado, here they are.
The Pioneers.
Oh, here we go. Percy.
They're tested. Rapid will make a huge save. Now up in front of net. Magic Bear, around 1, gets his flip back off the ceiling. Oh my, Magic Bear does it again.
Another one.
What a shot.
We get another one from Magic Bear. This man lives on the ceiling. He saves his flip yet again and punishes.
Ball bounce. The Pioneers.
Oh, here we go. Percy.
They're tested. Rapid will make a huge save. Now up in front of net. Magic Bear, around 1, gets his flip back off the ceiling. Oh my, Magic Bear does it again.
Another one.
What a shot.
We get another one from Magic Bear. This man lives on the ceiling. He saves his flip yet again and punishes.
Ball bouncing around. Team's looking for possession. Chicago gonna blast this one all the way to the backboard. Now Atomic does the same.
What a
That might just go in. It does. Coast to coast. Atomic
Oh my.
off his own backboard.
Oh, this is something that I feel like would only work against
Oh my
G2 with how aggressive they play. You have to time that hit perfectly.
Well, he would be able to reach that and do something with it. It would be Justin, but too high for him. There, team play by Xset. Oh, that
That is beautiful. No luck there. Nothing to do with NRG misplaying, just a full team passing play to annihilate the NRG defense.
Ahora son los hijos de Ruby quienes tienen que intentar salir, pero Eleven sigue poniendo la presión y acá se perdieron una nueva oportunidad.
Se perdieron dos oportunidades también. ¡Uy! El Masti de Rufino sacó. ¡Uy! ¿Qué hizo? El Masti. 3-3 después de la oportunidad perdida de Kander y de Kaido. Mirá, ay, qué fuerte que salió. 3-3. Ruby otra vez empata. Festival de goles.
Yeah, it looks like Envy are going to play this one out quite safe. That was the position where it would have been quite acceptable to attack early.
Oh, no
Turbo
way.
in the back pass.
It's actually going to reach Atomic. And it's a great passing play all around by the full team of Envy. Ridoko flipped on the goal line. I think he was afraid that Turbo was coming in to try and demo him.
Backboard Chicago is there. Oh, wait. What? What, Chicago? What? Just pushing his way through. Just nope, fake you out, and then just brute force. Just
players that they are, breakaway well wide, and Atomic off his own backboard on a dribble.
Justin is stopping in midfield. Here comes Mist. Bangs it to the upper 90. What a save! Whoa! Oh, is it no? Squishy slams the door on him.
Garrett will keep it away. I say that about Gibbs because I'm just jealous that he actually got to have a pro career. Oh my goodness, no way, Carl! How has he got rid of it to the other side of the field, and he's got it?
Are you kidding me? See Carl with an unbelievable play. It did set up quite nicely for him. The stars are aligning.
Expected Xset to be happy to sit back defensively and wait for the chance to come for them. And instead, they ripped that game from NRG's hands. Just over a minute played here in game 4. Now it's going to be Justin. He's gone fast. Oh, Justin, you can't do that to people.
Oh, see you later, Xset. That's 1, that's 2, that's 3, and that might be goal of the day.
Right there, Lucian really just making the defender jump up for that to maybe keep some pressure on. He did a good job of that. But coming over the top, it's Sypical doing Sypical things, getting the demo, and we knew he was going for it as that ball just creeps under the crossbar. I mean, Sypical, sometimes you just can't stop the man. What is AJ to do here?
All right, time for a few questions here on the remaining minutes on Behind the Wheel here on ESPN Esports. Sleegi Sly on Twitch asks, can you ask Sleegi what he thinks is going on with Oxygen? What is going on with Oxygen?
I mean, they're losing. I can tell you that much. They're not getting really great results. It's surprising, you know, when you look at a lineup like Farah, Shawset, and Astral, you expect good things. I really don't know why they're not getting results. They're just not playing that great. We haven't seen them performing at their highest. And, you know, I've got some really serious questions about that roster and what potentially they need to do to start picking things up because it's not looking good for them.
Question from Leo Tenshi 99. What do you think of Garrett G's long and winding story to finally capturing a championship after seeing it on stage so many times and not being able to grasp it, and that buildup of finally working towards it and failure after failure after failure and finally getting the big chip at the end of the day? What do you make of that story?
I think it's fantastic, but you know what I also think? I don't think that's the end of the movie for him. I think that's the breaking of the dam. I think that's what he needed to have happen to really focus in on getting more. He's got the stress of it behind him, and now he can focus on just building a collection. And for a player like Garrett, someone who's been in the scene for as long as he has, it was, as someone on the front row there, to see him grab it was one of the greatest experiences I've had with Rocket League. And I really, you know, love him as a player and as a personality. And I think that he has the absolute drive to not let that be the one and only that he gets.
I'm going to combine two questions from chat because they both have to do with Rogue. So this is a combined question from the OG Dirty and Lancer RL to round things out here. OG Dirty says, where would you put Rogue in a top 10 power ranking? And to add to that, Lancer colors it in a little bit. It feels like the Rocket League fan base is really divided on Kronovi as a player. With regard to his skill level, do you think he's making or breaking Rogue right now?
I'll answer the second part first real quick. I don't think Kronovi is either making or breaking this team. Rogue is in a really weird situation where they'll sometimes look really good, sometimes they don't, and it really just comes down to the day. I'm not quite sure that Kronovi is the issue. I think it's just their ability to work together as a unit and as a team sometimes is on, sometimes is off. If I had to place them in a top 10 for North America, man, I'd probably 7 or 8 is where I would place them. Probably 7, I think, is where I would land on at 7. I think they're definitely a team that can contend. They just have some real big problems to work out with how they operate together as a unit to start getting that consistency. Because when they look good, they could easily be a top 5 team, but there's a couple of teams like that when they look good, I feel could be a top 5.
Well, what looks good to me is that Rocket League is going free to play on Wednesday. Can't wait. I'm sure many people can't either. This is going to be huge, man. This is going to, I feel like this is a change in the game that's just going to open the floodgates to, you know how we always talk about Rocket League being a tier 1 esport, even though it kind of already is, but like the perception may not be there in the rest of esports. This, to me, is going to be the inflection point where finally people are like, oh yeah, it was all along. What are you talking about? I always thought that. I just never really said it.
Yeah, no, I think with free-to-play, this is I think the community as a whole has thought it for a while that free-to-play has been the only thing keeping Rocket League from being that tier 1 esport. And being free is what boomed Rocket League in the first place when it was on PlayStation Plus, and it was what really got everyone in, like, massively into it in the mainstream. And now going free-to-play everywhere, I think it's going to have the same effect. I think you're going to see a massive increase in the number of people. And the only thing that I would say is, as a community, we please need to be welcoming to them. If we can just cut down the toxicity just a little bit, even if it's just for a couple of months, let these new people enjoy the game and get their feet wet before we start talking about how at Gold 3, we don't understand why they're not hitting ceiling shots. That would really, I think, help keep the engagement here as well.
You know what else? What other game was really helped by being free on PlayStation Plus and is no doubt a tier 1 esport? Fall Guys.
Man, oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
So any orgs looking for Fall Guys competitors, Sleegi and I are available. Please slide into our DMs.
And I got the crowds to back it up.
Exactly. I haven't won yet. I've come in second many times, but I'm ready. I'm ready to compete. We're ready to shut it down here on Behind the Wheel. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, any questions, comments, any thoughts on the show, whatever you want to throw at us, either do so on Reddit or on Twitter at ESPN_esports. Sleegi, chat has consistently been saying you are love and you are life, so please come back.
As long as you'll have me, I'll always be back. This has been a lot of fun. I've loved it.
We enjoy your interviews, and you got to come on as a regular as well, as an analyst on the show. We very much appreciate it, and we also appreciate you for watching. Don't forget, every single Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern, whether you're watching us on Twitch, on Twitter, on the ESPN app, or on YouTube, we thank you very much. But for now, we got to go. Good vibes and acts of kindness, everybody. We'll see you next week.